Now, according to the Journal of American Cardiology, 1 in 5 people with artery disease, vascular disease and heart disease have depression. Health experts have also warned that by the year 2030, cardiovascular disease and depression will become the 2 most prominent causes of disability worldwide. Joining us to tell us about some of the cardiovascular risks and factors related to mental illness is Dr Mosima Mabunda, Discovery Vitality Head of Wellness. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, some very, very frightening numbers as we look to the year 2030. What could be some of the driving factors as we try and make sense of how this could be possible?
Good afternoon, Impo, and afternoon to your viewers. Thank you for having me. I think let's start by giving the viewers some context that on the 10th of October, which is this past Tuesday, it was World Mental Health Day. And the objectives of days such as that is to raise awareness about mental health illnesses. And specifically, I think it's worth shining a spotlight on depression, and which you've touched on, and we'll get to the depression and cardiovascular diseases. And for everyone who might be wondering or having different definitions of what depression is, I think depression can be simply defined. I like how Mayo Clinic defines it, which is simply a persistent feeling of sadness that is coupled with loss of interest in daily activities. And the reason I'm spotlighting it is we know that across the world, you have 280 million people that are living with depression. And I had the privilege of chatting to SADC, Cassie from SADC, on Tuesday as well, and she indicated that in South Africa, at least 30% of the adult population will have a mental health illness at some point in their lives. I thought these were important to share just that people understand why we actually spending time this afternoon speaking about mental health.
Yeah, sure.
And the stats that I've indicated are staggering, but we know that many people don't know that they have depression, which makes preventative screening important. And now linking depression and cardiovascular illness, because many people will be wondering why is mixing the two. We know that people that are living with cardiovascular diseases, which are diseases of the heart and blood vessels, 1 in 5 of those people actually have depression. And what is interesting is the relationship is actually bidirectional, that people that are living with depression are also at high risk of cardiovascular diseases. On the first instance, where we highlighted that people with cardiovascular diseases are at a much higher risk of depression, for me, it makes it even more important for these populations, people that are at risk, to prioritize screening. And the reason you'll hear people always saying people must prioritize screening is, 1, people don't know that they have depression or they have these conditions. And what screening does is it facilitates linkages to care so that people can have access to treatments and medications and other advances such as lifestyle behaviors that ultimately help manage depression. And I think it's worth sharing that in our data and Vitality, we've seen that when we incentivize our members to screen and they actually complete this depression screening, those members where the results suggest that they have moderate to severe symptoms of depression have a higher likelihood of actually going to seek care. So screening is beneficial if you have cardiovascular diseases, heart disease, even more so important, and other chronic conditions. But I think equally important, if you have depression, amongst other things, we know that you have a high risk of cardiovascular diseases. And then again, how we would approach it within Vitality is just to make it easy for members. And we've made what we call the Vitality Health Check, which is a screening assessment to detect risk factors for heart diseases. We've made it central to the program, so that members, in order to unlock the risk rewards in the program, have to complete this assessment. It was important for us to do it that way because of the stats that I've just highlighted that you've also indicated, that this condition is prevalent and people don't always know that they have them.
With Vitality known to incentivize healthy behavior patterns, do you think that these incentives are effectively serving as a motivation to your members to screen for depression and other disorders?
So you're certainly right. I think the short answer is yes. We see that when members are on Vitality, they have a high likelihood of engaging in healthy lifestyle behaviors. And typically, people don't necessarily enjoy, for some reason, and it's not just a South Africa phenomenon, people don't generally are not proactive in their health. There are people who are, but the majority of people only engage with the healthcare system when they are sick. So incentives gives you a carrot that you want, but to get the carrot, you need to go through the gate of a screening assessment. of exercising. And we've seen that that actually is a powerful motivator, because what people don't realize is as they chase those structured rewards, they actually are making choices that actually benefit their lifestyle. So most certainly the screening rates are higher, but we also see, like I mentioned, people connecting to care, which is ultimately what we want. So definitely would agree with you that we've seen that incentives work, and we've seen that there's vitality money, and we're using them across the business.
Dr. Mabunda, you published a paper last year with professors from UCT and Harvard University on the association between exercise and prevention of depression. Perhaps elaborate on the study and what it says about the link between exercise and depression. I mean, you've sort of covered it, but would coordination in treatment help? And if so, are we beginning to see it?
So firstly, thank you for raising that. Very critical point to raise. So we've spoken about the prevalence of depression. We've spoken about the fact that screening is important in linkages to care. I think it's equally important to mention that exercise has been shown to reduce the risk of having depression. It's also been shown that for people with symptoms of depression, exercise is actually helpful to alleviate the symptoms. In actual fact, I think last year, in the UK, the National Health Services has included exercise as treatment in the management recommendations for depression. And we're not talking about people becoming athletes overnight, right? So the study that you're referring to that we published in association with professors from UCT and Harvard University showed that if you increase your steps from 5,000, which the average person, by the way, walks 4 to 5,000 steps a day on average. If you use your phone and you track it, that's round about what many people would do. If you increase your average steps from 5,000 to 10,000 a single day in a week, so you don't have to do 10,000 steps every week, but you should. I would recommend that you do. But even if you do it just on one day, we've seen that it reduced 1 in 5 cases of depression. And I think this has been replicated in studies across the globe, but it was quite apt for us to see it in our population, that even small amounts of exercise are actually beneficial. And I actually am going to use this opportunity to encourage people that there are park runs across South Africa that are free for anyone. If there's a park run near you, I know I'm going to a park run tomorrow. Go to a park run with friends, or walk in your neighborhood, or do household work, or move in whichever way that resonates with you, because we know that not only actually does it positively impact depression, but we know that physical activity and movement also reduces risk of heart diseases, which you've mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So if that's your goal, to get physicians and specialists to prescribe exercise, given its influence in prevention and recovery, is this beginning to happen, or perhaps is it a matter of perhaps encouraging even more people to take walks in their neighborhoods and go to parks for us to now begin to see the shift?
So I'll start by citing an example in Canada, then move to South Africa. In Canada, the physicians there actually published a paper that showed that when they recommend park runs to their patient populations, one, it improves physical activity, because park run is something that people can access at no cost, and because of the social connectivity and the community of a park run environment, people tend to go more often, and they've been able to get their communities to be active. In South Africa, we have a partnership with the Vet Sports Science Institute, WISH, and I know they are working proactively, Prof. Patricius and his team, with clinicians across the country to try and infuse the concept of exercise as medicine. Many clinicians realize the benefit, but I think we still have a long way to make that a structured part on some of the recommendations that one would make. But definitely, I know clinicians are generally supportive. We had the South African Medical Association representatives actually at our mental health awareness event on Tuesday, and they actually were speaking about how they need to make concerted efforts to disseminate this information in a seamless way among their patient population.
Yeah. You say most people don't realize they have depression until they're diagnosed. What would some of the key signs be for one to really get a grasp on what may be happening to their mental well-being?
So for me, I promise you, my preferred approach is to not rely on self-diagnosis. My preferred approach is to almost have a standardized way of managing one's well-being and health, where, like, you'll say, every year I'll go for my screening, every other year I'll go for my mammogram, because if you rely on saying, if I see this, I'm going to do that, it might be too late. But I think what is worth mentioning is sometimes when you are withdrawn and depressed and isolated, you are not necessarily in the frame of mind to actually realize what's happening to you. What I've seen being helpful is people who know you, they'll notice that, oh, but Mosima is withdrawn. She's no longer coming out to run with us. She's not doing X, Y, Z. So people outside of you can actually share. But if you notice things like you're not sleeping well, things like insomnia, you used to do certain things, you no longer have interest in doing certain things in life that you used to do, that the thoughts that you have, like I had mentioned in the definition of depression, that it affects how you think, how you feel, which ultimately impacts how you behave. That some of the thoughts that you have, people feeling like life is not worth living. I think those are some of the clues and indications. But my preference is, without even second guessing, next time you visit your GP for whatever reason, it is worth just asking to screen for depression. Or if you're a Vitality member, the assessment is actually online. You can finish it in less than 5 minutes. You just go and click mental well-being assessments and go through the symptoms, because you need to use a validated screening questionnaire that will then score, because some of these symptoms are common. You see, so just because I didn't sleep yesterday doesn't mean now I've got depression. So because some of the symptoms are common, is how they interact and also over what duration. That also determines whether you've got low versus medium versus high risk. So for me, my biggest encouragement is to be wise about the interactions that one has with the health system. And when you do interact, try and make those visits more holistic and ask to be screened for other conditions over and above what led you to visit your GP.
Yeah, absolutely. And very lastly, before we let you go, I mean, what are studies showing about healthy eating and mental health, the correlation there, especially with the rise of healthy foods like fermented foods and the impact that they have on one's mental health?
So I think that everybody now realizes the importance of healthy eating, right? And we know that healthy eating is associated not only with physical but mental health benefits. We also know that when you eat unhealthy, the ramifications of that on your weight, and some of the physiological ramifications that happen, including depression. But I think one thing worth linking that we're seeing in our data is the more unhealthy people eat, it impacts their weight. It also influences some of their heart health risk factors. And we know that when people have excess weight, depression tends to be associated with that. So I think one needs to look at this holistically, that when you think about healthy eating versus unhealthy eating, some of the effects can be mediated in different ways, but one can't go wrong if you adopt healthy choices for your well-being. So in Vitality, because we realize the intersection between nutrition and mental health and physical health, we actually incentivize our members to get cash back when they buy healthy food.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mosima Mabunda there.